friends, it's Susanna. I'm back today to share a look at how I make Traveler's Notebook inserts. I'm calling it a Traveler's Notebook insert tutorial, but you can use it to make just plain Traveler's Notebook inserts. You can use it to make your own notebooks or journals or junk journals or just whatever you are in need of. So I'm using my favorite inserts from Organize with Katie, and this is just basically to make things easy so that I don't have to measure everything out and take a long time for the video. Her inserts are what I use in my B6 size Chic Sparrow Traveler's Notebook, and she already has the cut lines on there, and I needed to make this insert anyway, so I thought it was a perfect time to show you how I do it. Right now I am just cutting off the excess, trimming them down to size so that they'll fit in my B6, and I will eventually skip through this so that you don't have to watch the painful process of me cutting all 10 pages because it looks the exact same. But if you're making an insert and you're doing it for, say, a standard size or any other size, you just do your measurements as you normally would. So you'd measure for the size of your traveler's notebook and then cut each paper down to that size. Now I am using a bone folder, and I am just folding each of those pieces of paper folding each of those pieces of paper in half and then making a nice tight crease with that bone folder. And that just makes it easier to poke the holes in the correct spot when it comes time to bind it. So I'm a little off screen here, but I'm just doing the same thing over and over, and I didn't skip any of this because I figured I could give you other tips while I was doing this. So I start out with squared corners, just like you see here, and then eventually I will round the corners. I do recommend rounding the corners after you do the folding, mainly because I'm going to show you how to trim your pages to make them even. And you'll see what I mean here in a minute. But if you round your corners first, then once you bind it, everything looks all wonky. So I just recommend doing it in the order that I'm doing it here. So you trim your pages, then you fold them, and then you do the other steps before you round your corners. So as you can see, there's a little bit of overhang there, and you can use a craft knife like I just showed to just slice it all the way down, but I always mess things up when I do that, and it drives me nuts. So a super simple way to do this is just to take your paper trimmer or your scissors or whatever you're using and just trim off a very small sliver of the inner pages. So I'm going to do it. This insert is 10 pages front and back, and I think I'm going to do it on the middle, maybe 3 to 5 pages. And when you're using the craft knife, you'll obviously be way more precise than if you were just doing this, because I'm not measuring, I'm just trimming a little slice off each side of the inner pages, and I'm not measuring to make sure that those slices are the same width. So if you do need perfect lines, you'll want to use the craft knife, but I make these inserts each month, and I've gotten pretty quick at it, and this is just an easy way to make them all somewhat uniform without having to put too much effort in. So I went ahead and put those back in and tried it out, and the inner, I would say 2, maybe 3 stuck out a little bit further than I wanted, so I'm just trimming a tiny bit more off of those edges. And I mean, you can totally tell how uneven they are, but in the end, you can't even tell. It doesn't bother me at all that they're slightly off if you look closely. But again, if that does bother you, use a craft knife and a ruler, like a metal ruler or something, to do your trimming so that everything can be perfect. So then I just line everything up. You saw me tapping to make sure all the pages were lined up, and now I'm going to round the corners. And I like the corners rounded just because my traveler's notebook has rounded corners, so it feels really uniform. I'm using a crop-a-dial on the 1/2 inch setting, and I do the pages individually because of the fact that I didn't do proper measurements for each page. So each page is not the same, they're not all identical. So if I were to round the corners in one like chunk, they would be all wonky, like I mentioned earlier. So it seems like a lot of work to do all of these pages individually, but like I said, I do this once a month, and sometimes I make multiple inserts a month for different things, and it ends up going really quickly after you get the hang of it. I can make an insert in maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes, And then these two I am doing together. I'm cropping the corners together because they were cut the same length. And then I go back to individual pages. And like I said, if you just need a blank insert, you can do this exact same thing with just plain white computer paper. This is just the Organize with Katie inserts. Like I said, I linked to them in the Resource Center. They are my favorite Traveler's Notebook inserts at the moment. They're just her printable inserts that I printed at home on my printer on 32-pound paper. So now I'm using a, what are those called? A reamer? A puncher? I don't know. A little hole poker. I never remember what they're called. And this insert is about 7 inches long. So I'm doing one hole in the middle and then one on each side of those. So I do a, what is that, a 3.5, and then on each side I do a 1.5. And I'm showing there that if you do it, if you lay the insert flat and you poke the holes, your holes will not line up properly. So make sure that your insert is partially closed, just like I showed you a minute ago when you poke your holes. Just, how do I explain this? It's hard explaining it. Just put your punch on the crease and then fold the top of the insert over and push. And then you'll get some nice crisp holes that are right on the seam of the book instead of off to the side. So then I'm just using some embroidery floss and I put it through the middle hole, and then when it comes out you put it back through the top hole. Then you go across, you skip the middle hole and go out the back hole, the end hole, the bottom hole. I don't know what to call them. You can see what I'm doing. And then you go back through the middle hole. And I had to fight with it. My holes got misaligned when I was messing with it. Usually this is a very easy step, but you can see that I had to fight with it a little bit. And I believe this is called a pamphlet stitch, I think, if I remember correctly. So if I'm not explaining it well, which I know for a fact I'm not, you can just go ahead and Google pamphlet stitch and that should help you out. So as you can see, I have one of those pieces of thread on either side of that piece going down the middle. And then I pull it taut and I do a square knot. So I do right over left, left over right, right over left. So 3 knots total. Pull it tight and then trim the edges. And that's it. Super simple. There's an up close. You can see you do have a little bit of thread there. If that bothers you, then you could probably trim it shorter and maybe put a little bit of glue on the knot so that it doesn't come undone. But it's a nice bound book, and if you're doing a taller insert, you just add a couple more holes, or a shorter insert, you could probably get away with 2 holes. But I like the 3. It's nice and sturdy, and these books go through the ringer when I have them in my traveler's notebook, and I've never had a page tear out or anything like that. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for more crafty videos to come. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.